lovely weekend. Can you hear me? Uh, Are you able to hear me, Paul?
Yeah, all good, Karina.
Ah, how was your week?
Yeah, good. Very busy.
I know the feeling. I forgot to send out messages to say that I was going live in a few minutes and everything. It's normally I'm more organised, but today someone needed a very quick lawn done, and I thought, oh, I've got time. And then I thought, no, I don't. And I ended up having to drop my son home late. It was just a chaotic day. Um, so this week, a lot happened. There was talk of a lip spill. There's David Spears and his amazing stuff up of insiders, just like I did just then. um, and there's talk about the floods and the Friendly Geordies win. I think we can all say what an excellent job Friendly Geordies lawyers did this week. Well, over the whole court hearing. I don't know if you're able to catch any of that, were you?
Yeah, I did catch some of that. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it was an overreach of someone's power in a position. And now that the position or that person's gone from that position, it's been dropped like a hot potato. But I think looking at it, I mean, if any fair minded person would look at it closely and see what the evidence was, which was very little, it should be referred to ICAC for sure.
Oh, because it definitely shows that someone had a position that shouldn't have been met. Like that, no anti-terror squad should be going after Australians for just asking politicians questions. That's
Correct.
not normal.
Yeah.
I because they weren't getting the media coverage that they wanted. They used an anti-terror a lot of police. When did we get to the point that that's the new norm for
Well,
all of us?
we got to that norm probably in 2019. Just before the election was called, when we had a raid on the AWU office of Bill Shorten's. It hasn't changed. Not much has changed in 3 years. And I think what people have got to understand and really, I think the question needs to go out on a broader note. Who does the police force represent anymore? Do they represent the people, or do they represent the people that are telling them what to do? And
That's
really,
a
what are they investigating? Because again, that was found this week to be found. Uh, Everything was dropped. So yes, they found some money that they thought that hadn't been declared, but really, at the end of the day, all that time, you think about it, was 2013, but they happened to drop it just in this last week. Again, it's the federal police and state police. Who are they representing? They're not representing the people, that's for sure.
that's a really, really, really good point because I think that when they're doing these sham investigations, and they're not real, because if they were real investigations, it would look and feel like a real investigations. The media wouldn't be there first to get this
Correct.
clickbaity moment of like catching a Labor person out. Um, and here's the thing: if there were real investigations going on, we would know what happened to the Great Barrier Reef Fund. We would know what happened with the money that Barnaby Joyce was handed for the water envoy. There's so much about this that is just so many unknowns that I don't understand how we've gotten to this point of stupidity where people will say things like, oh, they're doing real things. Like I have very heated debates with a lot of LNP people, and a lot of it's always like, oh, but Labor's so much worse. And I look at them and go, yeah, how? Just throw something at me, and then they'll go, oh, what about the union rate? And I'm like the one that found nothing. But meanwhile, over here where there should be an investigation, there isn't. And
Yeah.
I think that that's where we're really at. It's a level of terribleness that I will never ever be able to understand. Is Annette still around? I thought I seen her pop up and then she didn't. Okay, I think we're going to have to start because I know that you've got limited time tonight too. And I want to run through as much as I can with you here. There's such a good range of topics to go through. The You see the Prime Minister and the protests. He totally just ignored the whole protest thing going on. He just, nope, not happening. It's not real. It doesn't exist. The typical
that was the
Prime
fires.
Minister.
It was the bushfires 2.0, wasn't it? Really? I
Oh
mean, you could
yeah.
see that was carefully managed. That one, he knew that he was in trouble. But I mean, how does he know he's in trouble? Because he didn't dress it in the first place. I mean, again, he was late to the party. Like, I just don't understand it. And then again, it's, well, they didn't ring me. Well, mate, you run the country. You're supposed to be in charge. What, you can't get on the phone and say, hey, listen, do you need some help? I'm offering the ADF to you. And then we hear today, supposedly, that the ADF was offered to New South Wales and they rejected it twice. So I don't know. I think there's a bit to run on this story yet. I don't know what's happening with it.
This is what it looked like. I don't know how many people have actually got a chance to see this. This is what the protests look like.
Got about 20 minutes. Compromising. Got about 20 minutes before anybody is rising. No more compromising. The water is rising. No more compromising. The water is rising. No more compromising. Got about 20 minutes. Compromising.
So this is what it looked and felt like. The Prime Minister decided he'd just skip out on all of that. Now, why? I don't know. I thought I seen what looked like to be Friendlyjordies in there, but I could have been crazy. It wouldn't surprise me if he would turn up to something like this, because he is a big climate change advocate. I've watched a lot of his stuff, and he's very, very good. I just want to play that again very quickly to see if I did.
The water is rising. No more compromising. The water is rising. No more compromising. The water is rising.
No, I don't know. Did you? Yeah, no, I might.
No, I couldn't see it, Katrina.
So, in light of that little moment, I thought that the Prime Minister would have made a speech on climate change. Nope, didn't happen. He was out, sweeping the floor of some gym, in a plain photo op, which is so weird. And then I see this cat one today, and I'm looking around thinking, really, you think the cat rules your household? Like, you're so weak-willed that a cat is ruling your household? The Prime Minister of the country, and it's running Kirribilli House? That's weird. Okay, dude. I don't know. Everything that does is so bizarre, and I never know what's going to come out of his mouth next. But
everything's just staged and managed, isn't it? I mean, it was reported too that they were able to find 40 police to come in and to keep the protesters away from him. I mean, really, you're supposed to be a person of the people, not He always constantly has to find a force to back him up on what his decisions is, and I don't know. I think it alienates people from the forces who are there to protect us or to, defend us. Really, I just don't think it works out well either way, to be honest.
When you think about it overall, the Prime Minister's position of not saying anything on climate change, not addressing any of it, ignoring the real flood victims, and then pretending like everything's fine, and then using 50 police that were local instead of having them help out in the time of crisis. He was using them for personal security.
You're correct. But here's the clinger on the whole thing, the glitcher. And it always is with this PM. I always say it about this PM. The devil is always in the detail. He always makes an announcement, and then we hear about later the detail that's in the announcement is not what the announcement was about. Yet he got the headline that he wanted on the mainstream media, 6 o'clock news about, how much money he was giving for the areas. But he left out a few areas, and funny, those areas were red areas, not blue areas, Ballina, Byron Bay, and there was one other area that he left out. And I was kind of like, oh, well, we didn't have the full details at the time. We need to investigate a little bit more. I mean, what did you need to investigate? What you couldn't see what the problem was? Everything with this guy is always about, well, I didn't know, or we still had to investigate a few things. It's always spin. It's always about marketing, and everything comes out later.
Well, That's exactly why I'm so angry with this position, and this is what I mean. He's got this really terrible position where even his colleagues, like even ABC, look at this, even ABC is starting to say, hey, his colleagues have noticed something's not quite kosher here. Let's go over that little craziness where even the ABC no longer wants to play ball with it. Even as much as they want to have David Spears and Ida Buttrose and whoever else they want to put on. Scott Morrison is in some trouble. His colleagues know it, and they don't know how the Prime Minister can get out of it. The mob has gone off at him, one Liberal MP said, of the national mood. They'd have identified a cycle of disgruntlement and complaints sweeping the nation that eroded any advantage of incumbency. Now, normally what happens is when a Prime Minister is going to an election, that normally gives him a boost in the polls. For some reason, the Liberal Party doesn't seem to get these bumps that are atypical with election cycles. What's really frustrating about that is that if the media was honest, not only would they not get a bump, but they would never get re-elected. That's partly why I do what I do, because they're not going to be honest about the real shit show of the Prime Minister. That's just the reality.
That's right. And look, and here's the thing. I clearly remember pre-2019, well, actually, the 2013 election, I think it was, when Rudd got dumped. And I clearly remember the ABC, Tony Abbott was available for every interview. He was an interviewer on every channel, every minute of the day. So they always had the opposition's point of view, which at that time was the LNP, and rightly so. They went to them and said, what are you going to do? And, his was, well, look, like he'd get to his point eventually, but he was there all the time. They don't go to elbow for his point of view. He doesn't get a run. He battles to get a run, and when he gets a run, they cut him off. And then, I've noticed that in the last year, so much so, that every time Albo announces he's going to do a interview at such and such a time, then all of a sudden the PM just changes his schedule, and he happens to have it at the same time. So of course they cross to the PM, and it cuts out Albo. So all he's doing is trying to cut his hair all the time, and the mainstream media just do not give Labor a fair shake of the tail. It's just really, really obvious.
That happened here in Queensland a fair bit, but the wave got too big to ignore, and I'm hoping that will happen federally. It become to this point where the LNP had this very fawning Courier Mail sort of stance, and all the print media and all the radio hosts were, fawning to love Campbell Newman, until he become Mr. Unlovable by sacking doctors and nurses. Now, this is pre-pandemic. You have to remember that, that was 2015. And they were like, no, you just can't fire doctors and nurses and frontline people.
Yeah.
And that was people's bottom of the line. You've gone too far with this. And I think that's the feeling of the nation right now. There was a sentiment gained where they naturally assumed that they knew all these things about the Liberal Party. So, for instance, when they talk about how they're better with money and all this kind of other stuff. Well, now we've had enough time for everyone to now see that is the biggest lie that they've ever gotten away with telling, that they were good with money. And I think if you've got an NBN service that is not fibre to the node, you definitely know you were lied to about how this cheaper service, which was a cost blowout, was not going to deliver that.
But here's the thing: have you seen many articles in the Telegraph or the Australian or the mainstream media going out there and doing 3-page, 4-page spreads, or Johnny up the road or Johnny down the road about it? Nothing, zilch, nothing.
That's partly, and the fact that they don't talk about climate change or anything. That's why people are so mad. These protests weren't little. The same deal. These people that were coming out saying, hey, we've just had a real bad flood. How about we do something about this? and in the middle of a pandemic and everything else, the real issues that we've had has overwhelmingly been ignored. And it's repugnant to think it took a horrible pandemic for people to go, yeah, maybe he's not the Prime Minister that we need. And here's the thing, I don't know if he really did have COVID, but he's going around telling people he had COVID. But at the same time, he's telling people that we shouldn't be living any differently with or without COVID.
Right, and here's the other thing on that, Katrina, the thing that I find that, they just announced this week, too early in the week, that they're going to be recommending, Otago's going to be recommending a fourth shot. But here's the mixed message. We've spent a squean late, as it was, on getting all our shots, the third shot now. Now, not many people have taken up the third shot. Now, why would you? Because all of a sudden the government sends a mixed message to everyone that you don't need a third shot, because if you're coming in from overseas to visit Australia, you only need two. So why would you go out and get a third one? Now they're talking about a fourth. I mean, don't waste your money, because no one's going to go and get it.
Well, see, and I mean, have a look at how we treated the 5 victims. This lady is evidence of just how terrible he does this. This is why he didn't meet the flood victims.
That's right.
He was scared someone was going to go, hey, dude, you kind of didn't rock up, COVID or no COVID. You seem to have no trouble rocking up to your own events. But when something the nation needs, you're not interested.
He struggles, Katrina. You see him in Parliament. He gets so uptight. I mean, he gets so angry, and you see it, and the bile starts coming out of his mouth, and he really, really gets personal in Parliament. So I think his minders were smart keeping him away from the people, because he just loses the plot.
Oh, he definitely can't hold his own in these circumstances. No. And it's not even like Morrison's mind has decided against Lismore Street. Well, probably wise. It might have proved ugly given the strained tempers acknowledged by the...
I think so, yeah.
That's the ABC outwardly saying, dude, you might have done the right thing, but it's still the wrong thing.
Correct.
But then you see Bill Shorten out there hugging and talking to people and asking about what they need. And it's like, how are people still having this weird moment where they're still trying to decide which ones would make a better Prime Minister? I don't know. I reckon a dude who can't visit the people compared to which one who can is a clear indication.
Plus also he's had really, if you're an incumbent leader, given he's been on TV almost every day for the last 3 years. Yeah. So his ratings should be sky high, because all you've seen is his mug on TV. So really his ratings should be through the roof, and that's why it's very hard for Albo to get any clear air, because we're going to the Prime Minister who's going to make an announcement. I mean, he's all announcements and no delivery. That's what we've learned from this bloke. He delivers nothing. He announces everything, and then you've got to look at the announcement closely and read the detail, because there's nothing in it. There's always something that's different to the announcement. But he's got the headline that he wants.
I love that, because then it goes into the Prime Minister saying, I absolutely understand the frustration. I understand the anger. I understand the disappointment. I understand the sense of abandonment. That's what he wants to lean into after just abandoning everyone at the height of the crisis. He acknowledges he's not doing this stuff. That's a really bizarre comment, that he would acknowledge it.
I don't think honestly, I don't think he does. I think he just says it. I think it's just all words.
Someone's written it out, and then he's gone, well, I better say it, because, the empathy training clearly didn't work,
Yeah, that hasn't worked. No. He still gets photos of him smirking when people, I saw that picture of him walking alongside Senator McKenzie the other day, and he was smirking. What's there to smirk at? People, asses are falling out of their pants. I mean, what is there to smirk about? And he's still got the smirk going. The smirk is there all the time.
That's the odd thing to me, is the amount of times I've seen with that weird grin on his face. It almost reminds me of the way a psychopath can't actually reflect other people's feelings, and that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And I think a lot of people overplay words, but this is one that I really, really want to encapsulate as to how I see the Prime Minister, as a flat-out psychopath. Watching him is almost frightening. You get this bone-chilling moment of, oh my God, he's smiling while people are suffering. I mean, look at how he makes no comment about the Biabella family that should be in Queensland, the immigration family that should have been handed Australian citizenship like that, because they not only were good taxpayers, but they're just good people. And they clearly can't go back to where they came from.
Yeah.
Utterly repugnant. And then the Prime Minister's like walking around smirking before he's talking about them. It's gross. There's no reason for it. And I don't know why we still put up with it. But I mean, this is a weird comment, but he still needs to be seen ready to help and heal and support and rebuild. But with a combination of household support and subsequent packages for farmers and businesses, I don't really see him coming out and giving overwhelming support for anybody. I mean, has anyone actually seen him give any support for anyone? He was basically dragged kicking and screaming to give Queensland help. He took his sweet ass time even talking about doing it. And by the time it was done, my friend's house was basically gone. And I've gone down there and helped out a little and wondered what else I can do. There's nothing left to do now. We're just waiting for the free contractors to come through. Like, this is how good Queensland's got it together. There's going to be free electrical contractors coming through to fix people's power and restore it. And then once that happens, the builder will come through that my friends are renting a property, and they're going to have all their walls put up. I've never seen anything like it. I've never experienced a flood before, but I'd never actually walked through someone's home that had been like that, filled with water. It was so sad.
Oh, some of the pictures coming out of there were just, some of the pictures I saw, McDonald's signs, they're like 3 to 4 meters in the air, and they're up to the top of the McDonald's sign. Like, it's just ridiculous the volume of water there was. I mean, it was relentless. I mean, really, when you saw those pictures, you think you're sitting in the lodge or Kirribilli and you think, do you think maybe I should do something about it? No, I'll wait for them to give me a call. Like, you know what I mean?
That's actually the most
bizarre at the
insensitive
best
thing about it. It's so insensitive. And then as you're watching him, you're thinking, is he going to say something that's like meaningful to help these people? And the silence was almost deafening. Yeah. And that night, when the SES was walking around the neighbourhoods, telling people, hey, you might want to leave, and they were getting, I got a few text messages saying, hey, you might want to leave soon if it gets a bit much. I knew that we were up a little bit higher, but my friends were below. Where you seen that McDonald's sign under in Goodna?
Yeah.
Where you seen that close to under, my friends were below that. They on a ground level, their house was like, Peter talks about it like down the bottom of the hill kind of thing. Incredible. I've never seen anything like it. It's scary. Declaring a national emergency is much done for the political atmosphere as it is for the difference it might make on the soggy ground. That's a weird comment. That declaring a national emergency would be helpful to the Prime Minister. How would it be helpful to the Prime Minister to declare a national emergency?
Supposedly to get rid of red tape. I remember we did an inquiry. I can't remember how many years ago it was now. I'm pretty sure it was during the Rod Gillard years when they did an inquiry when we had a disaster, another disaster. I mean, they're just all going to each other nowadays. But we had another disaster, and there was a recommendation that we bring out something like they have in the States, where there's, what's that body in the States they have? FEMA. So the whole idea was to bring in a FEMA type of situation. They squashed it. They got rid of it. Not good enough. And it just so everything gets fed into the one spot and everything gets coordinated through the one area instead of having all these different pieces of information coming in and being fed out. Just have one coordination, which would make sense, and that person then coordinates with the states, and then they get what they need and what they want. But we got rid of it. I remember we had it and we got rid of it.
I didn't know that even existed. That's incredible. When the electorate is ready-made for resentment, Morrison's aware that the federal response must be generous and seen to be generous, even if his allies disclose his intent to ensure somehow that the New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrott cops the blame too. I think Dominic Perrott copped a flogging for this. If people had been able to get hold of Dominic, the baby maker man, I don't care how many babies he's got, I care that he brags about it, and I care that he thinks that we care that he's making 1 million babies and not actually running the state properly. I wouldn't care if he had 20 children, so long as he was competent enough to get his crap together and run New South Wales adequately. That's, my thing. I
think the problem is, the problem has been with this PM and this committee is it's just all about partisan politics. He goes after any state that's not a Liberal state, and he just goes after them until he can badger them into submission. Just like he tried when South Australia, when we had previous government, was a Labor government in South Australia, he went after him. I mean, that guy went and got the big battery system in South Australia. I think it's failed once, and it failed for, I think it was either 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. Other than that, it hasn't failed. Yeah, correct.
Has been trying to sell it off, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, like they always do, mate. We make something and they get rid of it. They privatise it. Well, they've got to get a job when they leave politics. Seriously. It's all about looking after themselves when they leave. Really, it's everything about them is partisans. He goes after Western Australia all the time because he can't stand that that's a Labor government. He goes after Queensland because he can't stand that's a Labor government. And he goes after any state. I mean, the biggest silence that we got out of Morrison in the last 3 years was Tasmania. Tasmania was the last state, you might well know, that was the last state to open up out of COVID. They did nothing. They were shut. But we didn't hear anything about, what are they doing for their people in Tasmania? We didn't hear anything about it. It was all about Western Australia and all the other states.
It almost felt like Tasmania was not part of Australia.
Correct.
Whatever they were
closed,
doing,
mate.
It was weird.
Yeah.
But it was like South Australia was deathly quiet too. No one was like, hey, what's Stephen Marshall doing in the middle of COVID? No one was like, he's a dictator, he shut things down. I didn't hear none of that. Come on! It could have been fair. But no. Prime Minister must go after them for the kill shot. If it's a Labor state, you must go in. And I think that's why he spent so much money and time here in Queensland, because he realises that's the only way he's going to get in. He's hoping that New South Wales is so rusted on as a entity for the Conservatives that he thinks I'm one and done and I don't need to put that money in there. And I mean, it's an incredible thing to watch someone sit there and say to me, oh, well, New South Wales didn't get anything. Why do you think that is? And Queensland got the army and we even got the Air Force here. My simple response was, Queensland isn't guaranteed. Can you definitely say New South Wales isn't? I mean, really, can you definitely say it's off the table for the Conservatives? Because I can't. Look at the polling. The polling has... They really, if they really want the help, they need to convince enough people Conservatives are overdone. And that will be, I think, the rude awakening for Scott Morrison to go, okay, maybe this election isn't as guaranteed as what I thought. He's basically banking in on spending enough money here in Queensland and sort of just bungling New South Wales and hoping they'll forgive him. Western Australia is gone for him. There's no way he'll get Western Australia back.
I think he realises...
Tasmania's a maybe.
Yeah, I think he knows he's in trouble in Victoria as well.
Oh, yeah. As much as he went after Dean Andrews is still quite popular.
He is,
good luck with that one, you idiots.
And hopefully there's a couple of seats in trouble there. Tim Wilson, I hope, Geez, I hope they get rid of Tim Wilson.
Josh Frydenberg's or someone.
Josh is in a bit of trouble. Yep.
Tim Wilson. I seen this picture of him this week where he uploaded a picture of himself with books all up behind him, and I thought, gee, they're not great books, and not only are they not great books, but you had the balls to like put it out there as if we wouldn't pick apart what you were doing. Like, it almost felt like one of them Angus Taylor moments. Good job, Angus. Good job. Like trolling himself.
Yeah.
It was so weird.
I mean, I wish people would really avail themselves with what Tim stood for when he worked for the IPA. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, their wish list at the 2019 election, I think it was. Oh, no, the one before. Actually, 2013 election. It's just about privatising everything. And the funniest part is they're all about less regulation, but they want bigger government, more MPs. Sorry, smaller government, more MPs, and less regulation. They just want to sell everything off.
The crazy part is that they always talk about smaller government, but the government has never been so big with these weird made-up portfolios that no one actually knows what their role is. And then they play musical chairs with them all, and I'm looking at them going, what is going on here? Who actually is controlling this? And they look at me and go, well, it was that guy. And I'm like, well, no, who do I write to that actually screwed the pooch on this? They're like, oh, we're several, MPs through this. And like when I asked about the water envoy, I did a FOI on a water envoy story. And basically what I got was, well, Barnaby was, and then it sort of went quiet for a bit, and then we're not too sure what's happening with it now. And I've gone, that's not something I can say publicly. What are you willing to say publicly? Is that gone now? Is the water envoy thing gone? And where's the water? There's no response to this. I'm so damn frustrated that there's no response.
But don't forget, he sent in a submission to a report to the PM. I can't remember how much money he claimed via text message, but no one can find the text message that he sent.
So he got, I think, 80 million in total for water that could never ever be found. An 800-word text for nearly $1 million that he personally acquired through having this role.
So it was $1 million, almost $1 million a word, was it, basically? Like, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
It's an incredible indictment on our government when we know that you can't send an 800-word text. Barnaby's out there telling the public, "Hey, I sent it in a text." How is that
10
words?
1 word for 1 million for 10 words. I mean, it's outrageous, mate. It really is just the incompetence for the so-called best economic managers is just unbelievable, really.
How does a government get away with saying when you know that you can't send out a big text like that? But how does a government document be put into a text?
Correct.
Like, imagine someone going, no, I have this official role. It's a governmental role, and I'm going to text out the report.
Yeah. Just bizarre.
You'd be like, bizarre. You can't. No. On what planet was this a good idea? Oh, I'm a liberal MP. I'll get away with it. Okay, cool, bananas. That's what we're doing. You're like, what the? This is so weird.
And again, I always say, in these scenarios, could you imagine if it was a Labor Party, a Labor government in charge, and there was a Labor minister doing that? Could you imagine SAD? Could you imagine the Australian? Could you imagine the Telegraph front pages, like the Australian newspaper and Sky After Dark? Could you imagine what they would be going on about? Could you imagine?
They attack Labor for just responding.
Correct.
For just responding. Imagine if Labor actually buggered up this badly. I just couldn't. The people of Petacredlin world would be like losing that, and Rita Panini would be like, "Oh my God, the house is on fire," and I'll be like, "Oh my God, did you not just watch what we just went through? Don't gaslight me." And then they always write these responses like, "You're just a rusted on ALP voter," and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, when did you vote Labor? If you're going to call me a rusted on ALP voter, when did you vote Labor? Or anything else by that matter?" So if this is the ad hoc attack you want to go with in Rita Panini's chat, sure, I'll accept that. but you tell me when you've either voted Labor or not for a Liberal. And they're like, I'm a Clive Palmer voter. And I'm like, oh, that's worse. Because he poses to be opposed to the LNP, but will hand all of his preferences to the LNP and basically keep the LNP in power. Oh, that's significantly worse. And then they're like, you're terrible. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm at the point where I do not care what these idiots think when they're talking to me about how they voted for Clive Palmer and how he's significantly different. And I'm like, he's not fighting for your freedom. He got COVID worsted, called for 3 ambulances to come and get him. What? Ivermectin didn't work, buddy. And then he went around, you hide nor hair of him now. Apparently did a good number on him. It's not just a cold thing now, is it? I hope the bugger gets long COVID. Because I know people that did get long COVID. Sucked into him. He deserves everything he got. For all the other people that are suffering with COVID right now, there are 18,000 Queenslanders as of today, just today alone, that are known cases of COVID. I hope you're resting up and I hope you're getting well, and I know that your family too is struggling with COVID right now, Paul. And that's an awful, awful situation. I couldn't imagine what it's like for you and your family. Oh. And I'm just so frustrated and tired of dealing with these people that are telling me when it's how I'm overreacting in the pandemic, or that I'm overreacting when I'm dealing with the Conservatives. No, the thing is, I haven't reacted enough, and I'm not angry enough for you to understand that this is terrible. We are in a real terrible position right now.
Yep. And meanwhile, we're doing announcements on defence. Like, it's just, we've got people that haven't got homes, and the answer is we send up how many camper homes did they send the other day? Was it 20 or 12 or something? I mean, and how many people haven't got a place to live? I mean, seriously, look after your people at home first. Seriously.
I now know people that are talking about renting someone's caravan so they can be where their home is, so they can get back into it quicker.
Yeah.
There's no funds for this. These people are like, they're like either that or we're going to pitch a 2-man tent in here and let the kids stay with friends. And I'm like, oh, all of these options are bad. How do I not make you think about it like this? And they're like, oh, we've already decided. And I'm like, oh, crap. There's no way back now. Like, how didn't the Prime Minister have something? What about all them bushfire people that are still living in caravans this long on?
Yeah, that's right. They're still there. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you have a look at Scott Morrison's face during this particular presser, and he's so uninterested. He doesn't care.
He just pretends. It's all marketing. Everything's about the photo op with his personal photographer taking pictures, snaps of him. I mean, it's embarrassing to watch, to be quite honest. It really is.
You watch Labor, and they're definitely growing confidence that the PM is running out of options and time. Anthony Albanese has not made the case for change. The ABC said that although
he doesn't get any bloody coverage.
Change, one MP says.
Well, interview the bloke.
What MP said this? They never ever named the person. Albanese and his strategists appear to have anticipated the state of mind among some voters. I'm not proposing revolution, but I'm looking for renewal. He told business leaders. Albanese continues to portray himself as a safe option, continuity player who will do it better without an aggravating business sector. And he will do it better. Labor always does this stuff better. They have this way. Could you imagine in the financial crisis if the LNP had been in control? I can't help but think they didn't want to give out support and during the COVID crisis. And when they were forced to give out support, they pulled it back way too quickly. It was way too out of control. The financial crisis would have ruined more people in a quicker time.
You haven't heard that famous catchphrase out of any of the lips of the Conservatives in the mainstream media or the Conservatives, debt and deficit, long gone from their lips, never to be said again. And our grandkids and your grandkids and their grandkids will be paying forever. You don't hear that ever, and we're at $1 trillion debt now, not a billion, $1 trillion. Like, it's bizarre I just don't understand how people can't see how one-sided it is in politics in this country from the mainstream media. I can't understand how they cannot see it.
I think it's super interesting that they're talking about Albo taking advantage of Scott Morrison's bad position. I think that that's a weird play for the media to go with, that Albo is suddenly jumping on this opportunity to attack the Prime Minister. Does anyone remember the Abbott years, or even Howard? Or let's go with Malcolm Turnbull.
Yeah.
If you really, really want to go there, Mr. No Can Telly, which is what Abbott was famous for.
Yeah, that's right.
Wants to run around and say Labor is pouncing on it. Dude, if this was the LNP and Labor buggered up even half this amount, the news would be falling over itself to say, oh, but it's the LNP, so they're trustworthy.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm like, no, don't gaslight me.
They're apologists for them all the time. They're just apologists for them all the time. They apologise for them, or they say, well, you can see the government's point of view. No, well, you can now, but you didn't before. It's kind of like, and what, over 10 years, you haven't really thought, maybe it's time for a change. You've had 10 years, you've run out of ideas, your talent pool is woeful. I mean, you've got Attorney General, a new Attorney General who's been in hiding since she got the job. I mean, it's embarrassing. They are woeful. They can't get any work done in Parliament. I mean, Julia Gillard, when she was in power, passed more rules, and who was in charge of the House then? That was Anthony Albanese, from memory. He was the one who did all the deals and got everything passed to get the votes through.
He was Minister for Infrastructure. Like Kevin Rudd said the other night on Friendlyjordies podcast, name one thing that Anthony Albanese bungled or mismanaged in any of his portfolios. And not only do I challenge you to find it, but I challenge you to find it and find one thing that went over budget.
Yeah.
And it instantly becomes this moment where they turn into idiots, when they start attacking Labor for Anthony Albanese and wonder whether he can lead. Yeah, because a guy who studied economics, you're going to try and attack. To the guy who didn't and has a weird bookshelf of finances for dummies. Okay, dude, that's the good story, but it doesn't work. I don't know how they think that they can get away with saying stuff like that. It's repugnant to its core. And I mean, look at this. This is how they frame it. At the end of last year, Labor strategists knew their task for summer was to give voters a better understanding of Anthony Albanese, to fill the blanks for those who paid little attention to the federal opposition. No, the media paid little attention to Anthony Albanese. Now, they're like, maybe we should have taken a second look. And the media's like, well, the Prime Minister isn't going to come out and about to play. Labor definitely, through the advantages, got out in front of the camera before Scott Morrison could and said, look, here's what we would do if we had the power. If the media gave it enough airtime, they would definitely, I think the wider public would be like, how do we still have the LNP? It's incredible to watch. But it's not just that's going to be a problem. I'm hearing that there could be a definite lib spill on the way. Now, this is the official report. Okay, from Schwartz Media. Hi, I'm Ruby Jones. This is 7 a.m. That was March 11th. This week, the federal government has faced anger and outrage. criticism over its response to the catastrophic floods in Queensland and New South Wales. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, is facing another related problem. Disquiet within his own ranks about leadership. Today, columnist for the Saturday paper, Paul Bongiorno, on how the precarious Prime Minister position could be. Okay, so Ruby says, so Paul, I know that you've been talking to members of the coalition this week and that the topic of Scott Morrison's leadership has come up. I just want to say that this is quite a difficult thing for us to talk about and report on, because you can't give too much air on anonymous leaks of politicians. That's the whole point. They're leaking within themselves.
Yeah.
Normal governments leak small things. Like Labor still gets their weird leaky people that want to, run to lead press and say, oh, we're not too sure about that decision. There is always going to be that factor, but this isn't the case with the federal LNP. They're even running to left-leaning media like the Saturday paper, and you're hearing them say things like, yeah, we're definitely after a spill. Well, there's staffers within the LNP that are outwardly saying, hey, I reckon we need to go for the spill. That's an incredible indictment on this government. And I think that we're so close to a lib spill that I really, really, really think that we are in the midst of, I'm hearing that numbers are being taken this weekend. Expect by Tuesday morning they will be having a talk about Dutton trying to get the numbers.
But even if it doesn't happen, Katrina, even if it doesn't happen, everything being equal, and anyone who's fair-minded person should rightly say, when it happened with the Rudd-Gillard government, they dumped him. So why should it be any different with this mob when you got the bloke who's the current PM who stood up at the podium and said, "I'm what was the words he said in front of Turnbull? I'm ambitious for him. He's my Prime Minister," and at the same time he was in the background taking numbers for a leadership spill. I mean, seriously, all things taken equal, they should be dumped because they are just so disingenuous of running a government. They're more worried about their own gig.
That's the interesting part about watching this play out. When I'm watching, I don't know how many people know this, but they're so keen. These staffers are so keen to go, no, we're taking numbers. The thing that shocks me is that Peter Dutton actually thinks that he's got a run at this. I'm hearing Josh Frydenberg, his staff are definitely saying on the wings, hey, we could go in and we could do this. They're pumping his little tires up, and he's like the little engine that could. They're like, we gotta. And you hear their staff, they're so keen for Josh Frydenberg to do it. But he's so deeply unpopular. I think that this will blow up significantly in the government's face.
Oh, he's definitely in trouble. Definitely in trouble in Victoria. He's a Victorian and he bagged the hell out of Dan Andrews, and I don't think it's gone down very well in his own electorate. Victorians are pretty dirty with him. So, I don't think he'd be, honestly, I don't think there's anyone you'd want to pick from them, to be honest.
And I mean, when they're talking about, what do you think we should know about what's been said about Scott Morrison within his own party right now? And then Paul says, well, Ruby, I think we're entitled to know that that's not just the people talking. It's not off the record, disgruntled employees saying that they're unhappy and that I'd like to change leader. No, they're not quiet people. These aren't quiet staffers or quiet MPs. This is now like the loud chorus coming forward. I would say by Tuesday you will know whether someone has the numbers for this lib spill. And the reason I know that this is so legit is because of the way that they're talking about Scott Morrison. One of them, I don't know if you remember, the other day we started talking about the Engadine Macca's incident. One of the Liberal MPs is talking about that exact moment. And it was all off the record, but it didn't matter. It had seeped into their talking point that, hey, at least I won't crap myself in Macca's. It's literally now seeped into the Liberal Party that there's a good chance that Scott Morrison may have done that in Macca's.
I mean, I really think if someone does step up, they're going to be wanting some sort of guarantee from the party to say that even if I lose, but if I save some seats, then I'm guaranteed to lead, because not many would want to take on a role 2 months out from an election, knowing full well that if they lose, then they might have a leadership spill. You know what I mean? You're just not going to put yourself out there. You'd rather wait for the mess to finish and then put your hand up and get 3 years and take the cash. That's what they're all about. It's about cash and power.
You see Sky After Dark trying to make it about Anthony Albanese's leadership. Like, you watch 5 minutes of Sky After Dark and they're like, no, it's definitely Labor. Do not forget the narrative. You have to go after Labor. And I'm like, dude, this is so freaking transparent. You are crying little weenie babies. What is wrong with you? I remember when Andrew Bolt cried speaking of that over being glitter bombed. It bothered him so much that he spent a whole time trying to convince people of how a glitter bomb was terrorism. They're such crybabies that when their own gets, this little bit of backlash, they're like, no, definitely look at Labor. And even when Labor has their fights, they're not like, look at the Liberal Party. They're saying, hey, maybe we should fix that. Maybe we should fix this infighting. It's a little bit weird where Labor gets all retrospective and they want to fix things, and the LNP are like, no, just look over there, don't look at us.
Yeah, definitely the look over there, nothing to see
position.
Yeah,
it makes no sense to me. And then they're like, one recipient told me, and I quote, the last time this happened, the leader was toppled. And then they're like, right, Ruby says, okay, that's obviously a reference from a former Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull. Paul says, well, the MP didn't nominate whether it was Turnbull or Tony Abbott, but the emails are going out organising before the next party room get-together, which will be at the end of the month for the budget. See, and this is why I think they're so serious about this. They're sending out the emails. There's now this political knife that's out there, and I'm waiting to see if they kill off either Josh Frydenberg or Scott Morrison or Peter Dutton. I'm wondering which one will end up with the biggest knife in them at the end of this.
Or do they throw in a wobbly, knowing full well that they're going to lose, and then Dutton and Frydenberg come in for the big, we'll save the party after the election. That's a possibility.
I'm shocked that they haven't come out with something like, well, Corey Bernardi will make a sudden reappearance, like a jack-in-the-box moment. Like, no, this was the plan all along. And that's the really bizarre nature of this, is that you're watching this play out in such a weird moment. It's almost like an animals in the wild kind of thing. You never know what's going to happen, and it's going to go badly, and someone's going to get eaten alive. It's just who and how. And the Liberal Party are great at eating their own up. When they toppled Tony Abbott, that's it. He was never ever seen of ever again. And he was this sad little backbencher who cried about everything, and they made him sound like a whiny little girl. That's how they perceived him, was like just this whiny little person on the backbench. And then when Barnaby got sent to the backbench, they were both sitting there sulking together. I remember seeing those pictures thinking, oh my God, they're such crybabies. They can never actually get up and be nice people. They're so weird. They never humble themselves in a position. I remember Barnaby running to the press saying, I need more money and I can't afford coffees anymore and everything. And I'm like, dude,
that's right. Yeah. And he's got a free accommodation from a businessman where he lives. And it's like, dude, seriously, how much money do you guys get as politicians? You get living away allowance. You don't pay for a car because you sit in the back seat, and you don't pay for petrol. Like, Really?
The comms cars. That's what
Yeah.
I mean. They get all
Yeah.
this stuff, and I'm like, dude, I'm working basically 7 days a week to fill up my house. You don't even work for even a quarter of that. What have you got, 10 sitting days? And what is on your plate in terms of actual work? Like, what do you actually do? It's a little bit weird that we're at a point where we don't know what they're actually doing, what their roles actually are. Like, I haven't heard from the Environment Minister since all of this happened. I'm not even sure who the Environment Minister is now. You would think that the Environment Minister would have something to say about all these climate events.
Is it Little Proud? I think it's Little Proud. No, it's Canavan, isn't it? I think.
Isn't that amazing that we're playing Who's the Environment Minister this week? That's my whole point. They run such... No one knows what anyone's actually doing. And
no idea.
But even when you talk about it like that, right? The way that they're talking about it, okay, before a coup, numbers are marshalled. The waters are tested. Both Morrison and Dutton camps did this before the move on Malcolm Turnbull. See, Dutton he's wanted this for so long. Oh my God, Dutton's going to cry like a baby if he doesn't get... He will knife anyone to get this. Now watch this next sneaky move. Okay. We all know Morrison's people prove better at the dark arts. Well, I have to tell you, this isn't a done deal. I understand it. But one Liberal MP said, I quote, anything could happen. Stay tuned. They're doing it. They're doing it. They're not just
I'm bringing the popcorn.
Yeah, it's definitely on. I think it's interesting how hardcore Dutton is about this. And that Dutton thinks that somehow people will be like, we would prefer that guy over Albo. Why would Dutton think that he's more popular than Albo?
Oh, God, it's bewildering. The guy he gets on there and he talks at you. He can't talk to you. That's the problem with the guy. He's really got no people skills whatsoever.
I call him the dog food man and he blocked me. That's a real thing I did. I couldn't blame him for blocking me. But I can say this. I may have used several other profiles to repeat the comment, which were subsequently blocked. And then I made it kind of go a bit wild on Twitter. I then took it to Twitter and I wasn't done with him yet. I don't wanted everyone to just call him Dog Food Dutton. It turned into a thing. Because this is how they operate. They operate by calling names and it sticks. So I just now refer to him as Dog Food Dutton. You know, this way, anytime, and then someone's going to ask, well, why do they call you Dog Food Dutton? And then he has to tell the story. There's no talking around it. That's why I go with whenever I'm like, Scotty, you mean Engadine Macca's guy? You know, this is the reason that my conversations go like this is to make it unforgettable. Because this is their tactic. I'm using their dark little arts of being nasty against them. They think that the left are nice and pretty and that they're just going to cop this crap. Oh, hell no. I ain't going down without a fight. Engadine Macca's Prime Minister and Dog Food Dutton have definitely got their work cut out for them if they think that my narrative is going to change into what they perceive as a leftist angle. Oh no, I'm definitely in for the kill. The thing is, they shouldn't have taught me how to do this. They had sayings for Kevin Rudd and Julie Gillard, and they attacked and attacked and attacked. And I thought, dude, this is actually pretty genius. I'm gonna use it. If you're gonna empower us with these weird ad hoc attacks, I'm gonna use it. This cannot be the thing that only you get to control the narrative of. So that's what I'm trying to push the groups into. Nickname them, make it stick, and every time that someone mentions his name, the first thing that comes to mind is that nickname.
Anyway, mate, listen, my time's up, unfortunately.
Yep, you're right. I'll continue on, but yeah.
I gotta go. So enjoy the rest of the show, and
Yep.
I'll speak to you during the week.
Okay, you have fun, mate.
Okay, mate. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Okay, for those of you still sticking around, so they definitely will be taking the numbers. Ruby then points out, so we're really back here again, Paul, in the position where leaders can be knifed without warning. Are we in the killing season? I definitely think we are. We are definitely in the midst of a real LNP spill. This isn't like something that people in back rooms are now discussing. They're now taking numbers. Paul then says, well, I must say it looks and sounds like it, Ruby. I spoke to a Liberal backbencher from New South Wales, Morrison's home state, who told me basically Peter Dutton was a better option. And the quote there was, Dutts would save the furniture. Now, that's a very interesting comment. Dutton would save the furniture. So there's a weird little moment where they think Dutton is like the new saviour of the Liberal Party. I think that's a terrible idea, so let's egg them on to do it. You know, and it's funny when I'm like, let's do it, because it's a terrible idea. I think that this is what I'm sort of watching in New South Wales too with Dominic Perrott. I'm like, it's a terrible idea to roll Gladys for Dominic Perrott, but let's do it and then let people see how ugly the party really is. That's kind of where I'm going with this. It's a terrible idea for the nation. That's why it's terrible. But at least then your sort of big goggles would be off for the nation, and you'd have to go, wait a minute, there isn't enough beers to drown out that crap show. That's the idea. Now, however this manifests itself is going to be a whole nother issue. And to think that Dutton would save the furniture, others, particularly in Victoria, strongly disagree. Their preferred candidate would be Josh Frydenberg, who was, of course, one of their own, and in their view, more user-friendly image. Josh Frydenberg. Okay, weird flex that they think Josh Frydenberg would. He's not popular either. But I don't think any Prime Minister that the LNP have really picked have been widely popular. The sheen is gone. They got nothing now. Ruby. Okay, obviously neither Peter Dutton or Josh Frydenberg are actually saying they would challenge for the leadership role. Paul then says, well, that's right, Ruby. The consensus is Peter Dutton is more authentic, and he was around this week in the media trying to reset the image. And then you have David Koch interview him. Peter Dutton, where are the troops? The Peter Dutton, morning Kochie, well, they're spreading out right across the northern New South Wales. Paul, the Defence Minister went on Sunrise for what proved to be a tough interview that had him on the back foot. No, that's... I don't think that that's the narrative. No one should have that narrative. They're not really asking him hard questions. They're not asking him, hey, where's the Prime Minister? Why isn't he doing his thing? Or why did it take so long to get the troops in? Then he used the troops as a shield. That then become the new sticking point, was blame everyone else for that, and say that we were attacking the military in lieu of just admitting that you didn't pull them out on time. It's an incredible situation that I think is telling. And I mean, senior Liberals are deeply divided over who should lead the party to the election. With numbers being canvassed this week to test the waters, a recent poll Found Aussies also can't agree with voters split on Morrison and Dutton. And Friedenberg. Let that sink in for a moment. Even Aussies can't agree on who should be the Prime Minister in the Liberal Party. Scott Morrison has done that bad of a job that he's bringing his own job into a crisis mode. That there is a telling tale. And I definitely think we're going to have some problems in saying that. But the Prime Minister isn't done there. He's holding events. And just how much do you think it would cost to see him? So I was fortunate enough to find this. Hold on. I'm normally more put together than that. $14,000 a ticket being charged for WA Libs and Friends to have access to Morrison. I'd tell them they're dreaming too. Why are they holding functions like this? They can't even hold a competent function with people that are in need. This is grotesque at best. This is, I wouldn't want dinner with Dutton, and particularly if I had to pay for it, let alone $14,000. That's incredible. What a waste of money that is. That's where we're at. We're paying ridiculous money to see people doing ridiculous things. But this is what I mean. It's just been revealed how serious this situation really is. Oh, hold on. Where'd it go? There we go. It's just been revealed that the ADF offered support for the floods and was rejected by the New South Wales government twice. So, whatever you think of the Prime Minister's role in this, the New South Wales Premier also has dirt on his hands for this one. New South Wales definitely needed all the help it could get. And the Premier was like, no. That was basically his approach, was no. We're just going to leave it out there to dry. So you had people doing even crazier things. I remember seeing this and thinking, oh my God, we are in the worst situation that we've ever been in. I need to pull this up differently, or did I find it? Hold on one sec. So there is a woman who actually was playing a major role in this. Entire screen, and then we'll go. I haven't figured out how to do it from pictures. And then you go desktop. Oh. So picture. Nope, that's not it. There we go. Here's what I wanted to show you. I don't know if you can see this. The name Sally Flannery is one that a lot of families will talk about for generations, simply because they possibly owe their lives to her initiative during the Lismore floods. Early Monday morning, Sally Flannery flagged down passing boat. Hold on one sec. I just need to make sure that that is seeable properly. Hold on one sec. I just need to make sure that that is seeable properly. Yeah, it doesn't look like it is. Yep. No. Okay. Flagged down a passing boat and was rescued from the roof. As she climbed onto. At the time, it was almost impossible. Yeah, it says. Share. Okay. At the time, it was almost impossible to make contact with emergency services. Before being rescued, she had made a post to a small business group that she managed on Facebook, encouraging others to share their address if they needed help. This woman is a real hero. So Sally Flannery should be someone that we should be really out there promoting. This sparked a deluge of reactions such as need evacuation ASAP, water waist deep in second story. After a stiff drink, Sally got to work and triaged all the requests onto an online spreadsheet. And by 4 a.m. the next morning, she had a team of volunteers who confirmed that the safe evacuation of hundreds of people. By Thursday night, 1,000 people had been rescued by volunteers in tinnies, that's tiny boats, in a flota of small craft could be seen going backwards and forwards along the streets of Lismore. While government was talking, Sally and her volunteers were acting. God knows how many lives were saved in the initiative of one young woman. And that's what we have. That was one young woman, Sally Flannery, that we should be promoting in the midst of this awful flood-ravaged Australia. In between New South Wales and Queensland. She did it in New South Wales, and good on her. 1,000 people. I definitely think that she needs a medal of some kind. Someone should be fixing that woman up. But I think that we're going to be in a position where she isn't getting the media coverage I'd like. So when they're talking about this stuff, I want them to know that I know that they've really bungled this. Oh, hold on, is that the one I'm... So the next one I want to talk about is Stephen Marshall. There's been talk about, because Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk just recently put out a tweet saying, hey, we're going to make power prices cheaper. Now, we know that the power in South Australia should be cheaper. They're on that battery, and there's no reason to not have it better and cheaper. It's interesting that we're at a point where they're not having these real frank discussions about lower power prices. They will always say that they will deliver these things, but no Liberals actually ever deliver it, because they're lying. Even when they attempt to promise it now, everyone's like, nah, they're not really going to do it. And I think that that's the sad part of what's happened here, is that all the lies that they told have now gotten to the point where people know that this will never happen. I think South Australia definitely made a mistake in getting a Liberal government, but I'm hoping it'll change back to Labor's hands. I'm hearing that the guy running is very healthy and looks apparently quite well, according to FRINEDLYJORDIES. And Kevin Rudd. So that'll be one to watch. The South Australian election is going to be super duper fun. If you haven't caught on to how that's going to build in momentum, I think we should definitely be having a look at that. So Yeah, I definitely think that more is coming in terms of how that's going to play out. But I have good news. So, the next one would be a Friendly Jordies win. I don't know how many people got to see this amazing one. Friendly Jordies producers' charges were dropped. Jordan himself, I would love to see him have like this peacock moment where he was like just attacking them all, but he was calm, he was concise, and he was on point with his messaging. I'd imagine that there would have been a lot of anger and frustration behind the scenes, and so there should have been. What happened to Jordan Shank's producer, we should all take note at how they treat media that is not kind to them. We should already remember that when Labor isn't nice to them, they raid them. When the unions aren't nice to the Liberal Party and won't play ball, they raid them. When media isn't nice to them, like the Annika Smithhurst and other journalists, they raid them. This is par for the course of the LNP. But I think this was particularly galling because they used a fixated terror unit to go after Christo Lancaster. Now, what happened here should never be forgotten. This is how a dictator gets their position. They scare a media into this idea that if you say something that isn't very nice to the current Prime Minister, you get told, hey, how about we just come for your job? And that's basically what happened here. Do not forget that this is what they did. And they went whole hog at it. And they meant to do exactly the reaction that they got. They meant to harm Christo Lancaster and his family. They intended it to scare the living bejeebers out of him so he wouldn't be able to talk about anything, and he'd be too afraid to then say anything that was truthful against the Liberal government. Everyone should be watching that. That will be the story that I think everyone should be addressing. And it is the case. We are in some very, very terrible, terrible times for our media. Dictators don't just arrive. They come in like these subtle things, like first they'll go after you like little media outlets, ones that aren't saying nice things. And then eventually they'll go after people that aren't saying nice things about the government of the day. And then once they're done with the people that weren't saying nice things, and then the media that wasn't saying nice things, then they go after businesses and they destroy them. And eventually you get a dictator. Then the government starts picking up things that it should never have had control of. So then you've got this fawning media, you've got the fawning people. You watch the people of North Korea actually hear their leader and say, oh, he doesn't need a bathroom and he rides unicorns. And no one corrects it. And that's what the Prime Minister is after. And make no mistake, if he wanted to, oh yeah, with the way Murdoch has influenced our nation, this is like heartbeat stuff. In my state of Queensland particularly, they own 100% of the print. And then they promised that they wouldn't close down when they bought it all up, all the small little papers that were informing people. And that's exactly what they did. This is the moment that you know something went terribly wrong. New South Wales Police dropped all charges against Friendly Jordies producer Christo Lancaster after accusing him of stalking former Deputy Premier John Barilaro. Now, this was embarrassing on two fronts. One, there's video of the arrest and how they harmed Christo's family, right? But then you've got a Deputy Premier stepping out and basically having to resign over this. And then you've got a Liberal government not really making any comment on this. And then you got like MPs like Senator Rex Patrick and a few Labor MPs going, what happened here? What did you do and why did you do that? And you listen to Mick Fuller, and he was not the police commissioner, and they really didn't have a good reason for doing any of this. They made it sound like a run-of-the-mill fixated persons unit job. No, this was not that at all. And it wasn't difficult to see that this whole fixated persons unit was designed to create a dictatorship. All it was Christo going, hey, John Barilaro, here's the papers that you submitted and they're not accurate. He had errors about his address on the paperwork submitted. I don't know how many people caught that. But Christo walks up to John Barilaro's waiting car because it was on the way to his uni, and basically he was like, hey, you've written down Parliament's your address. That's not a real address that you can use. This order isn't written right. You're trying to use an address that isn't yours. So I think we've now officially gotten to the point that we can't return from this. Even if the LNP fix some of this imagery around this, this is a story that should haunt them for a very, very long time. I don't know how other media aren't crapping themselves over this. This was big. This should have been the story that everyone was like, yeah, this is bad. But it gets a little bit more grimier than that. He's 22 years old. This is a 22-year-old man. Like, we're just now arresting people that are getting into politics at 22 for asking questions of an elected official. No, come on, that's our babies. Dude, no, you crossed some line. I tell you right now, if I say something offensive about you and you don't like it, be damned if you'd approach one of my family members. Oh boy, I wouldn't shut up. You would never hear the end of me. I don't know how Jordan kept it so professional. I would have been screaming. And I think Christo himself had this moment of elegance where he was like, no, you can do this, but understand you're being recorded. He was so calm. I don't know. My interactions with police are quite low, and anytime they do and they ask me something, I always panic. Panic like a little girl panic. So the fact that he was able to hold his ground and say, whoa, just so you know, this is being recorded and this isn't, my family has nothing to do with this. I would have been screaming. This young fella did an amazing job, and there's no way they stalked him. He was charged with 4 counts of stalking, intimidating with intent to cause fear or physical harm, and a hearing was set down for May this year. They really thought that he was going to harm John Barilaro. With what evidence would they produce to say that? They now know that John Barilaro lied too. They know that John Barilaro lied about this encounter whole. And Mick Fuller Now, I would say that they knew that at the time, but they didn't realise how big FRINEDLYJORDIES was. Do you know his average video gets 200,000 views? Yeah. Yeah, that's what you're looking at, people. 200,000 views. And that's that's time after time. He also has a huge Patreon following too. So if you're not subbed and liking his content and supporting his Patreon, you're actually not supporting a great independent. You'd be really not doing any good, because what Jordan does, he needs all of us to like get behind him now. If we're not all putting our money into what Jordan is doing, we're going to be in big trouble. Look at how quickly they turned the ABC into what it looks like now with David Spears and Ida Buttrose. Look at how quick they turned that. So Michael West Media and Jordan Shanks and their teams, and the Saturday paper. These are papers these are media that I think we're going to have to super duper invest in. I will do almost every live I can to promote what their messaging is. It's not only effective, but it definitely makes us think differently about what we're doing. Monday, but on Thursday, Downing Centre Local Court Magistrate Susan McIntyre ordered New South Wales Police pay costs of $12,000 to Lancaster's lawyer Mark Davis. Now, if you remember, the lawyer that he got is very good. Very good lawyer. I think he was a foreign correspondent lawyer. I was reading. Mr. Davis said that he confirmed that his client was considering all of his legal options after authorities dropped the charges with no explanation. That's an interesting point. They just dropped all the charges and no explanation. No, we're sorry. No, we're done with this. And it's true. He suffered enormous damage to his reputation, and it's not a nice thing to be called a stalker. It's when it's utterly untrue. He said Lancaster's mother and girlfriend were both seriously assaulted and suffered significant trauma during the unnecessary move, effectively a counter-terror unit. All options are being considered now. Video footage of Lancaster's arrest uploaded to YouTube includes a period of commotion in which the camera is lowered and his mother exclaims that a police officer had assaulted her. They're also the dog as well. They had a dog. The police officer responds in the video by saying he tripped over. In the video, FRINEDLYJORDIES Jordan Shanks accuses police of storming into Lancaster's home, assaulting his family, taking him away in an unmarked police car. And so this was akin to arrest in Poncets, Chile. Chile. That there should be scary for everyone. In an unmarked car with no explanation, they're like, hey, we're just going to take the kid. It's frightening. Mr. Davis said that while his client was delighted on Thursday, it resulted that he was lucky. It's disturbing to reflect that if Krista hadn't filmed it and he didn't have the resources of a legal team, he'd be likely marching forward to a conviction. But for the fact that he's a producer and filmed it, they weren't even gonna like film their own. I would love to see any police cams of that interaction, and don't tell me that they don't have them, because that's pure negligence if they don't. I want to hear what was said prior to this too. Like, I want to hear an inquiry into this. The criminal case against a YouTube channel producer formed as a part of a larger spat between his boss, Shanks, and Mr. Barilaro, who sued him in the federal court for defamation. In November, former MP received an apology, but no damages when the lawsuit was settled over two videos titled Bras and The Secret Dictatorship, published by Shanks' YouTube channel in 2020. Officers had alleged Lenker intimidated or stalked then Deputy Premier in 2021 on 2 occasions at Macquarie University in Sydney on June 4. Asked why he didn't like Mr. Barilaro, Lenker said outside court last year it wasn't about liking him. It's about doing journalism, he told reporters, and it is. He's 100% right. This is about doing journalism. And that's where we're at. We're in this sad little moment where I don't think we can just get ourselves out of this funk that we're in with the public and the media and how quickly it's going to spiral out of control. And each time they're doing things like this, it doesn't get the attention that it truly, truly deserves. We all should be like screaming that they did this. It's outrageous to its core that we're accepting that as a normal explanation. Like, oh yeah, we just used the fixated persons unit to intimidate a kid because he said something that wasn't flattering about John Barilaro and it was actually true. I want to get to the point where you should be able to say these things. What is free speech only optional if you're attacking Labor? Is that what we want to tell people? Because that's basically where we're at. We're at this point where we're going to tell people, no, I don't really care. You know, what happens to these people? Speaking of speech, turns out Mark McGowan had a little bit to say. So, when that sort of happened, the very first thing I thought of was Mark McGowan actually told the truth, and it's interesting to hear how this exchange went down. Listen to this.
Annual hearing checks are a really important part of your general health and wellbeing regime, and if you're over 26 years of age, you can book a free hearing check with the experts at Audica. If it's the first ever hearing check that you've done, you'll also earn 3,000 Qantas points if you book and attend before June the 1st. There's over 350 Audica clinics that you can choose from, and love your ears with Audica. Check out the website to find your nearest and book your free hearing check online. audica.com.au.
Just gone 9:30. I've got to tell you, some of the evidence playing out this morning in the federal court in Sydney is more than a little fascinating, and I can understand now, just reading some of the stuff that's coming through, I can understand why Mark McGowan and John Quigley, the Attorney General, were not keen on their text messages to each other regarding Clive Palmer becoming public. Of course, the lawyers who mounted that challenge to the court were rejected. The court said, yep, it should be well and truly in the public arena. And this morning, it's beginning to be revealed. We'll have a full report just after 10 o'clock, but just reading some of this stuff, given that this is in the context of a defamation action, this is quite extraordinary. This has been prompted by Clive Palmer's lawyer, Peter Gray, SC, who has begun to reveal this and has Mark McGowan in the stand again this morning. And a text message, I'll give you a bit of a taste, a text message that Mark McGowan wrote to John Quigley says as follows, referring to Clive Palmer, he is a fat liar. He's the worst Australian who is not in jail.
keep in mind what that claim is. I think it's fair to say, yeah, this is the stuff that should happen to Clive Palmer. He poisoned the surrounding areas of his nickel refinery that he didn't clean up properly. He never paid his workers, and he is a dud. It's just an honest to God truth. And I think no one can say that Mark McGowan wasn't completely honest in this take.
That's a text message from Mark McGowan to the Attorney General. Then he goes on to say, in another response to John Quigley, this is the Premier, I was probably exaggerating a little bit. I don't have a high opinion of him and don't like him. In other texts, John Quigley refers to Mr. Palmer as a big fat liar and shortened that to BFL several times. Quigley says in another text, get between the BFL and a stack of money and anything goes. And in another text, John Quigley writes, just tell the BFL that Q is not going to fold in intimidation. Q as in Quigley, obviously referring to himself there in third person. Mark McGowan's response, BFL, brilliant. Now in court, in answer to Peter Gray, Mark McGowan has said that that was a piece of humour with a colleague. He says that reflects the way that I thought it was a funny play on the Roald Dahl character, the big friendly giant, the BFG. But in this case, for Clive Palmer, it was BFL, big fat liar. More details in that court case just after 10 on the morning program.
It would appear that it didn't look too good for Clive Palmer. Didn't make Mark McGowan look bad at all. I don't think it did. I mean, the Prime Minister is called a psychopath by his people. So if we're going to have these takes that, oh, it was terrible for Mark to be, having these conversations with someone, and that by discovery it would make Mark look bad for having a conversation like that, when you know full well what he'd done to the nickel workers, what he lied about with COVID, and the role that he's played in screwing over our democracy. It's a fair call. And I'm appalled that people like Mark McGowan didn't want his text note. I wouldn't want my text note. Even though it's just grab a 3 litre of milk for me on your way home from work, or hey, are you sure that you locked the door when we left? It's definitely one of those things where when you're looking at it from a 30,000 feet view, you wouldn't want your texts out there anyway, even if they were like as minuscule as what I sent. In saying that though, I think it's fundamentally clear Clive Palmer thinks that he was onto something in that text leaking. Here's the thing though, Clive isn't a bribe man. He thinks short-term gain, long-term it blows up in his stupid little fat face. If him getting COVID wasn't enough, and him trying to buy hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and everything else that he could get his little grubby little paws on wasn't clear, he needed 3 ambos to wheel him out. Look, I don't begrudge the man, health services. I begrudge the man for what could have killed people. There have been real deaths to this. And I can't, tie a straight line from what Clive Palmer said to an actual death. But I can tell you this. I have met people that believe Clive Palmer. And that's frightening. Should be scary to you too. But, I mean, when you listen to them, it's clear why. What they were doing was so wrong. So, if Mark is mad, yeah, and Clive was throwing his money around, pretending that he was the big shot in this game, and it blew up in his stupid little face. Even the Prime Minister was like, I can't play a role in this court proceedings against Mark McGowan. So our actual Prime Minister wanted to attack another Premier so badly he wanted to help Clive Palmer and his big money hits. Let that sink in for everyone for a moment. That's what was really going to happen. I don't know what to say to that. But, you know, this is our political climate. So next I want to talk about a protest in South Australia. So, Uyghur community rallies against South Australia Premier Stephen Marshall and his ties to the Chinese government, linked to oligarchs like Sally Zhu, put Stephen Marshall out last, punished him at the ballot box for opening a disgraceful Chinese consulate compound. This community definitely knows how to tell a story. And I think its treatment of the Uyghurs, which is Muslim people in China, definitely needs addressing. We can't ignore that as a crisis anymore. But here's why we can't do that. When we're having these conversations, we always talk about how we're going to do the human rights thing and how we're better than this. We haven't been better with our refugees in such a long time. I think the Children Overboard saga really, really made us look bad. And it should have. It should have had that effect. For many reasons. I think the rallying against Stephen Marshall needs to be bigger. I think to even have support for this compound that is going on in China, we need to be alarmed with that. There's no good reason to have this. They've never explained what the role is behind having it. And I think that that's definitely a concern. But I think the concern that sits front of mind for me is that whenever China does something, our government is always so laxed in its response. It never says, oh, well, maybe it should treat people better. But who are we to tell people to do that when we got the Barbella family? We're going to tell people how to treat people better. Yeah, that's interesting. So it really does put us in a pickle. And I think we're in serious trouble when we have those conversations. There's also another topic I want to touch. Chris Minns. So he's been out and about talking to locals stuck in the flood area. If you haven't seen him around, that's not, haven't been out and about much. He has been everywhere, the guy has, in New South Wales. So, here's him talking about businesses of affected areas. Where I visited today need help and they need it now. They're being forced to spend $50,000 of their own money before they can access support funding back. The simple truth is many businesses don't have access to that sort of capital to get their business up and running again. They're going to require upfront grant from the New South Wales government. We cannot have a situation where a town like Lismore can't get up off their knees because they can't access funds that have been promised to them by the government. Now, this is just sad. Looking at these images, it's hard not to feel incredibly sad for the people of Lismore. And even when we look at some of this, all of it as a whole will impact everyone a long, long time. And there should be more done for these communities. I don't know what it looks like. I've never done flood management, but I'd assume that it's not an easy thing to do. There's more with him doing stuff. I just need to find... hold on. So there's that one. So that's the one I need to find. So it's not that one. It's that one. So oh, I think I already did do that one. In terms of where that sits, I think we're going to be in serious situations. We haven't dealt with the overarching issue of climate change. But I think the bigger issue is that not only do we not talk about how we fix climate change, but we never discuss who should be responsible in leading the charge behind it. You will always hear government, the LNP government, spout different things and create these tiny little booklets. Labor and the Greens, on their own, have made a lot of talk about what happens in floods. Now, this is going to be an ongoing issue. What we do in flood, fire, and cyclone areas, because it seems like we always turn up when it's too late. We don't do anything to protect people before it happens. Queensland was devastated in a lot of floods this season, but it could have been a lot worse. It's weird to say that in retrospect. I would definitely say the 2011 floods were significantly, it felt more bigger than this. And a lot more people got a lot more help a lot quicker in Queensland. New South Wales, however, did not experience the same level of urgency. And that's particularly galling to me that New South Wales did not get what it needed in terms of help with this stuff. We're going to have a national conversation about why that didn't happen and who's responsible for that. I think that we're looking at some terrible, terrible moments with this government. We got some really terrible leaders in right now. We're not just talking about Scott Morrison and how on the nose he is with people. We are literally talking about the LNP as a whole. Would you trust Barnaby Joyce to step up as a Prime Minister at all? Would you trust Peter Dutton or Josh Frydenberg? The LNP as a whole has an image issue. They don't have any climate policy. They don't have a national policy that will help us. All they want to do is talk about their submarine deals and how they can help out their buddies. It's nothing ever comes to fruition with them. It's quite an appalling thing to watch, and I'm a little bit aghast that this is allowed to function this way. And I think that this is going to be an important factor for us. We're in a position that we need to change this government. There's it's now or never. This next election will be the one that you're going to tell your grandkids that you did something about. 10 years of incompetence needs an ass kick. It needs a definite punishment. A definite don't do that again moment. If you attempt that again, we're coming for you. I want to make it fundamentally clear that that's never an okay position to have. That we have a government that mistreats its public and then has a media gaslighting you into the idea that it's okay. That it's okay to attack the media if you say something unkind to it. Or that it's okay to not have a proper climate policy. It's okay to let flood victims flounder while the Prime Minister says that he got COVID and wouldn't relinquish any of his roles to make sure someone was acting on behalf of the people. I really don't think he's going to deliver anything that's big for you or for anyone else. So if you're counting on the Prime Minister to rock up to your local town and say, hey, you're going to deliver this, that or the other to it. Lismore and Ballina are a great example of what isn't going to happen here. What's not going to happen is Lismore will not be helped getting on its feet. They're going to be forgotten. Much like the people still living in camper vans in the bushfire ravaged regions. We definitely have something to be concerned about. Don't take my word for it, take theirs. And each time they've been handed something wrong, they find a way to mismanage it into oblivion. And I think that we need to stop giving them chances to do this. This is not an appropriate way to behave. And we need to tell people, we need to stop having the conversations. I think I grew up in a time when you just didn't talk about politics because you were worried about offending someone. Now it's offensive to me to not discuss a state of play. Not just because I'm a political commentator, but because I do think that there is something terrible happening right now. And we all should be alarmed by what's going on here. I'm not a person that's cynical in times of crisis. But in the last few, I definitely become cynical about our role of government and how quickly it could respond in a real time of need. I think if this had been a Labor government, we definitely would have avoided a catastrophe of COVID. Take a look at New Zealand's messaging. They ordered vaccinations a lot sooner and enough to do everyone twice. They ordered even the good vaccine and they did the lockdowns as they were supposed to do them, and they managed everyone. And they got their compliance by making sure people were on point. The government had a clear and great message to tell people, and they wanted to contain the crisis. And they knew exactly how to do it. Now, that's not just because Jacinta Ardern is Labor, but because she definitely had leadership qualities that knew how to dig out of a hole. And the pandemic is a definite hole. I'm looking around at petrol prices soaring. I don't hear in government entities saying, here's what we're doing for you to make sure costs aren't going to be put onto your groceries and onto your car, and we're going to release a certain amount of fuel, or we're going to do something. We're going to take some of the big tax off it or something. You don't hear them say any of that. This is the time that they should be doing something that's good for the people. And I don't feel that in this time. I think that we have an opportunity here that we've squandered. We were this very rich and together nation. But in the midst of having a conservative government, it got lost. Now you've got anti-vaxxers screaming at the top of their lungs, things that they know nothing about, trying to overrule doctors. What the hell? No one should want to be part of a country that's partaking in that. It's not only abhorrent, but it makes us look like idiots. You could almost say, like, it'll teach me right for laughing at the United States and thinking, we don't have idiots like that. Not only do we have idiots like that, some of us are related to them. Joke's on me. So now I'm having the difficult conversations with people that I never thought I would be. I'm now saying things like, hey, how'd you vote last election? Why? And what's changed for you now? And how can I change mine? If you're in my inner circle of friends, there's no way you don't know what I do. If I've rocked up to your house to mow a lawn, you're definitely hearing from me. I'm not only going to my clients and saying, I'm an ALP voter through and through, and here's why. I'm saying to family, I'm an ALP voter, and here's why. I'm going to anyone that's going to listen this election cycle. I'm volunteering out of the Labor headquarters. I'm making sure we get over the line. If you haven't signed up, why not? You can't sit around waiting for someone to do this stuff for you. I want everyone to sign up at their local ALP branch. Nothing is guaranteed. Do not assume that we're going to get this election in the bag because Scott Morrison has done such a terrible job. They've all done terrible jobs. Right back to Tony Abbott. And they've had long enough to fix it. I know they're not better money managers. Doesn't exist. I want to tell you some animated, great speech that someone famous might have said. But I'll leave you with this idea. We're only as good as the people that we're surrounding ourselves with. And if you're surrounding yourself with people that are making question marks about how awful this whole thing has been handled, and they're not living in the reality that this has been one of the lowest set of years in history for this nation. Oh my God, that's awful. And it really is awful. But we can fix it all. We can turn all of this around in a heartbeat. But I want you to make sure everyone knows that. I want the message to be clear and concise. Sign up to your Labor office today. And I don't want to hear the whole Labor Greens bashing. It's pointless. We know Labor can lead it, and we know that they've got to just do it. Doesn't matter how perfect or imperfect you think Albo is. He's significantly better than anything Scott Morrison can deliver, or any LNP. Anyway, I've had a wonderful night with you. For more on This Week in Politics, join me same time, 6 p.m. in Queensland. 7 p.m. in New South Wales. We go to 8 p.m. in Queensland, 9 p.m. in New South Wales. I want to thank my co-host Paul for this evening, and I want to give him a shout out and say thank you to his lovely family for letting me steal him for an hour. Love you guys. See you next week. Have fun. And when I do see you guys again, it definitely will be fun. Have fun, guys.